Remember when John Paul Miller attached all those medical records to his big dumb affidavit? Yeah, the ones he then submitted to the court, therefore making it a matter of public record. I made an entire series about that affidavit, and the other day I came across one of those episodes that had been removed from TikTok because it had been reported. So I looked to see which episode it was, and it was the one about one of the medical records being included in the affidavit that couldn't have been Mica's. So I figured if someone cared enough to have it removed, I'd care enough to make sure I mentioned it again. So that's what started the idea of this episode. I was just going to make a quick video to remind people about it, but then I started looking at Mica's medical records again, and then I was graciously gifted a pile of documents about Mica's case. Thank you, Misty. And there were more medical records in it. I got to looking at all those medical records and I noticed some odd things about them. I guess after doing this for over a year, my pay attention skills have improved. Welcome back to the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and I'm so glad you're here. In this episode, we're going to be looking at a couple of medical records that John Paul Miller included in his big dumb affidavit. Well, looking at them again. Before we start, though, I've noticed that when I post a video about Mica's case, I get comments wondering where I've been. For all of you who are thinking I've disappeared, I haven't. It's just that YouTube thinks you only want to see videos about Mica's case. And while that might be true for some of you, others might be interested in other cases. If you don't have notifications turned on for my channel, you'll only see videos similar to what you've seen before. So with that out of the way, the medical record that was included in the affidavit was from an unknown patient who definitely wasn't John Paul Miller and was admitted on 2/9/2024 with acute psychosis, bipolar disorder with mania, cannabis dependence, and dependent personality disorder. This patient was prescribed nicotine patches and quetiapine, which is the generic for Seroquel. Mica was involuntarily committed to the hospital on 2/7/2024, and her medical records show she has no nicotine dependency. In fact, in every single record of tobacco cessation history, it's always marked no, so it doesn't seem like it was her getting the nicotine patches. Her medical records also show that she only had 2 diagnoses, bipolar 1 and dependent personality disorder. The only note about medicine on her chart was for her to increase her Seroquel and that she was resistant to other medications at the time, so no nicotine patches. Her records also show that she hadn't used any drugs or illegal substances in the past 30 days, so no cannabis dependency either. And then when I received the more in-depth medical record of that same hospital stay, her current meds showed nicotine patches. But what's odd is that nicotine patches were supposedly originally prescribed in 22, but then were on a record as having been given to her in the ER, but the date given was supposedly 2/8, and she was no longer in the emergency room at that time. She'd already been admitted. So they shouldn't have been on the emergency room notes. This record is another that shows no tobacco cessation history, and at the end of it is this, quote, "Tobacco cessation screening. Patient was screened and counseled on smoking cessation at time of discharge. Patient is not a smoker or smokes less than a quarter of a pack a day, and have verbalized that they do not require assistance with tobacco cessation at this time." End quote. Now, why would that be on the medical record of someone using nicotine patches? The simple answer is that it wouldn't. So, how did nicotine patches get on her medical record? Well, the first option is that someone altered her medical records. And the other option is that someone altered her medical records. But why would someone want to do that? Why was it so important for nicotine patches to be on her medical records? Well, it might be to match that medical record of Mr. Unknown, since I'm pretty sure that one wasn't supposed to be included in the affidavit. Mica was admitted into the same hospital on November 29th, 2022, and stayed until December 5th, 2022. Now, this was less than 2 weeks after she had gone to visit her sister, and John Paul was texting all the craziness about coming up there and going full Hulk on them, and was threatening to off himself, only to find out that when police showed up for a wellness check, because Mica was genuinely worried he actually would end his life, that putz was taking out the trash. But if we go back to Mr. Unknown's medical record from February 9th, 2009, it shows that the patient had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and dependent personality disorder exactly on 11/29/2022, the same date that Mica had been admitted into the hospital. And if that isn't just the biggest coincidence that has ever coincidenced. What else is strange is that on Micah's medical record from 22, there was some bleed through from the opposite side of the printed paper. And you know I can't resist some obscure text. So I flipped it in Photoshop and darkened it, and I'll be darned if it isn't almost the exact same text as her medical record from her 2024 hospitalization. Even the British spelling of counseled is used on both charts instead of the English spelling. The only differences, at least the only ones I can make out, is the line reviewed RBS risk-benefit split of medication and pregnancy, and the line reports that husband purchased 6 guns on the 2022 report is simply husband has guns on the 24 report. And isn't it a bit weird that John Paul went around screaming that Micah was going to kill herself with a gun, but still kept guns in his house? It's also strange that that would be one of the only 2 things that were changed on her record. Also, in the alleged 24 medical record, it states specifically the patient was started on Seroquel, just like it has on the 22 record. But in other places that aren't exactly like the 22 version, it states that her Seroquel was increased, which means she was already on it. Confused yet? I think somehow, and in some way, that definitely wasn't someone purposely altering her medical records. Micah's 2022 medical record got mixed in with her 24 medical record. So if we have Mr. Unknown's hospitalizations at the same time as Micah's, does this mean that John Paul went to the hospital at the same time Micah did, so he would have medical records that show the symptoms he wanted her to have, just in case her doctors didn't diagnose her with the diagnosis he wanted her to have? I don't think she was ever diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Not properly, anyway. I think her doctors were told she had it. And according to John Paul's affidavit, he wrote that she had been consistently diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar 2 with severe psychosis, and dependent personality disorder, which just isn't true. So I think there has to be a reason that that one video is the one that was removed from TikTok. And the only other video that someone reported and had removed was the one I had made about John Paul's little dumb book, and said that I didn't think he was really that good of a soccer player. So I guess don't call him out when he makes an oopsie and includes medical records with an affidavit that aren't supposed to be there, and don't tell him you think your grandma can play soccer better than him. Another reason I think the medical records have been altered is because of all the different fonts. I counted 5 different fonts on a single page. I'd expect there to be 2 and maybe 3, but 5 is a bit much. And the text is sloppy and the spacing is off. And in what is supposed to be her full medical report from her hospital stay in 24, there are pages missing. For instance, part of the report has page number 3 of 3, but the next is 3 of 4. And there's a 1 of 4 and then a 3 of 4. If someone was copying chunks of text from reports from 2022 and pasting them into 2024, and maybe even pasting in from their own record, it would stand to reason that there might be some page numbering mishaps. The other thing that has always bothered me on her medical records is how much they reference what John Paul told them, and a lot of times it was the opposite of what Micah had told them. I think he used the "I'm a preacher, so you have to believe me" thing so he could orchestrate Micah's mental health care. So let's just say that John Paul is the one who altered the medical records. We already know he was gung-ho in letting everyone know that his wife had a mental illness, but did he really alter records in a court affidavit? Why not? This guy's the one who said that anyone can lie on an affidavit, right? Did he alter them to try and prove Micah had a mental illness to other people? Or did he alter them to prove to Micah that she had a mental illness? Let's say that her manner of death remains a suicide. If someone told medical personnel that Mica had a diagnosis that she didn't really have, and told those same medical caregivers that she had symptoms she didn't really have, and then convinced Mica that she really had a mental illness and it was the worst thing that could ever happen, and did things to purposely push her to the point of ending her life, that person should be held responsible for her death because that's a crime. One final thing that bothers me about her medical records, at least for now, and that is that in the affidavit there are two redacted lines. And before I got the full medical record, I thought they were something personal and that the court had redacted it, but that's not it. The first line that was redacted was this: states that she was in the wrong and she should always confer with her husband before doing any actions. So why would that be redacted unless it's because it makes Jean Paul sound like a controlling a-hole? The other line that was redacted was, will not restart lithium. So was this redacted because she hadn't been taking lithium for a while at this point? Why redact that? It wasn't the court redacting what medicine she was taking because the next line mentions Seroquel. Is it because John Paul kept flapping his gums about how Mica needed her lithium and if she'd only had her lithium, she would still be alive? I hope you've been able to follow along with all of this. I feel like it was all gunked up in my head, and I tried my best to ungunk it, but it seems like a lot of things that involve John Paul Miller are just all completely gunked up. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like what I'm doing with the channel, I wouldn't be mad at you if you wanted to financially support me by joining as a member so I can keep doing my thing. Memberships start at the low price of $3 a month, and call me Mrs. Bighead, but I like to think I'm worth at least 10 cents a day in entertainment value. Please like, comment, and subscribe as this helps the channel grow. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.